Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the latest Flexible Space Association webinar, the final one of 2020. I'm Jane Sartin. I'm the Executive Director of the Flexible Space Association, and I'm joined today by three guests from the world of flexible workspace, and I will invite them to introduce themselves. So, Chris, start with you.
Good morning, Jane. Thank you for having me. I'm Chris Boultwood, Head of Technology at Workspace Group. We own and operate around 60 business centres across the capital, and my role is to look after our corporate and operational technology interests, as well as our customer-facing technology across the portfolio.
Thank you. And Dan?
Hi there. Yes, thanks, Jane. Yes, my name's Daniel Owers. I'm an account director here at the Excell Group. We're a communications company that's a technology partner for flexible operating spaces and landlords across London and the whole of the UK. I look after some of the enterprise landlords and the tenants within those buildings.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Rob.
Good morning, morning everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here. My name is Rob Strachan. I run a company called FlexiSpace Marketing, which, as the name suggests, we specialise in marketing in solutions in our industry, and I help owners, operators, and brokers get the results they need from their marketing.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So I've got a few questions to run through, but if anyone watching has questions that they'd like to chip in with, do please put them into the chat box, and we'll try and either pick them up as we go along or at the end. So to start with, it's obviously continues to be a really challenging time for operators, with the government message being to work from home if you can, and it seems likely that's going to continue for a little while yet. Would you advise that that operators are generally best focusing on reducing costs, or is now the time to invest for the future? Dan, can we start with you on that?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Jane. So we believe that there is a degree of unpredictability in every business, and especially with obviously a global pandemic, Brexit and recent presidential elections. It's fair to say that this may continue for a little while longer, unfortunately. But we believe that if you can invest, now is the best time. We'll come on to the future of FlexSpace and the plan next year, and how we're excited about it next year. But we believe it's going to be the place to be, with an already growing market of around 35% annually. Offshore operators will correct me if I'm wrong on those statistics, but an already growing marketplace. So we believe that if you can invest, now is the best time, because when people start returning to offices, you don't want to be on the back foot. And we believe that connectivity is a significant part of that investment to be ready for the influx of, hopefully, tenants we'll see in the middle of New Year. And we're doing that in a way with some of our enterprise landlords, or landlords that were operating traditional space as well as flexible space, have now large chunks of building that sat unused, that were traditionally sort of operated as the long-term 25-year leases. Those now, some of those are sat vacant because larger corporations don't want to be tied into a 25-year lease for a large office space that they can no longer utilise or won't be utilising properly. So we're actually doing a campaign around lighting up these spaces for free. I know nothing's free in these days, but the idea being is we absorb some of the capex costs, the setup costs for these spaces, and internet is only charged when a tenant moves into that vacant space. So we're assisting landlords in getting empty vacant spaces filled as soon as possible, really, through the use of technology and high-speed internet.
Okay, thank you. Rob, what's your thoughts on this?
I mean, clearly, 2020, the management of cash has been an absolutely top priority. I think, though, talking specifically from a marketing point of view, there are sometimes things within the marketing realm that perhaps people might not usually have time for. And I think one of the things that has been interesting about this year is that there has been that time to address things that perhaps people might not normally have the time or the headspace to do, be that redesigning your website or rewriting your marketing copy or whatever it might be. So I also feel and believe, and we'll talk about this in much more detail, that that there'll be a turning of the market at some point in Q1 is my view, and I think it's important to be ready for that and to be on the front foot. So I strongly feel that the time should be used to do things that perhaps might not be normally done.
Yeah, no, it's been an opportunity, I'm sure, for a lot of people to reflect on how their business operates. Chris, is there anything you'd add to that from Workspace's perspective?
Well, I think our model of property ownership means that we haven't been faced with all of the same challenges, but we are very focused on continually improving operational efficiencies and customer engagement, which I would imagine are a key priority for many operators. And investment continues in our internal operating platforms and customer-facing technologies. And an example of that would be further investment into our mobile app. So that's an area where we're looking to drive even better customer engagement moving forward. So that's where we stand on it, but completely agree. If there is capital available, it is a good time to invest.
Yeah, and we've certainly been hearing of a range of projects from some of our members that they've been taking on, whether that's technology for the future or revamping reception areas and things as well over the past few months. So, sort of changing slightly to a different area, how can flexible operators differentiate themselves in what is an increasingly competitive climate? We keep hearing of new entrants into this market, so everyone's seeing it as the growth area for the future. But that differentiation will become increasingly important. Dan, start with you on that.
No, of course, and obviously not being a flexible operator ourselves, but we know there was an estimated over 6,000 dedicated flexible workspaces in the UK. So it doesn't really matter where you are in the country. I think around the corner there's going to be a competitor, and I think even the coming years, even more so with recent events. And we believe to differentiate yourself, that technology is vital to achieving this. And it's not just the use, as an example, smaller operators. We're seeing people reacting and changing the way they're using smaller spaces. So with like the forum we're on today, using video conferencing and so on, people there's a lot more investment and technology needed to make sure that is adequate. Whereas before, we didn't seem to see that so much. It was more of a nice to have in a meeting room, wasn't really utilized. Whereas now it's going to be an essential part of a space to be able to be used like that for all sorts of size of businesses, especially when we'll come on to hybrid working and how we're going to move forward. But that's going to play a key role in that. Okay,
thank you. And Chris, are there examples that perhaps Workspace have been instigating themselves, or just more generally that you could add?
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple of areas that are worth mentioning here. I mean, there's a lot of debate around hyper flexibility. So, some operators want to be able to book out, offices or spaces for a really short period of time, even hourly. I think if that is an approach that operators want to take, there's clearly an investment required in the technology to support that. Our experience through our operating platforms is it takes a lot of investment and effort to give you the platform to be able to achieve that level of flexibility. So that is something worth considering up front when looking at your hyper flexible model. So that would be my first point. And our experience here was around our meeting room proposition. So we had to completely redesign how the website worked and provided that flexibility to customers versus a 2-year lease, for example, which is our typical offering. The other area of course to note is the emphasis and the role of the business centre itself. So it is an area to foster collaboration. It provides a professional workspace for people to be comfortable in and work well. And reliability of connectivity and security of that connectivity for us is a key focus. And I think we'll come on to talk about that in a bit more detail later. But those are the two areas that I would pick up on.
Okay, thank you. And Rob, perhaps picking up on that general differentiation point, but also in particular, I've noticed in perhaps particularly over the last 6 months or so that some operators are increasing their use of social media for marketing. Do you think that's an effective use of time? Would you encourage more people to do that? And is there one platform that you particularly recommend for them to stand out on?
Yes, absolutely. So social media is increasingly becoming a must-have in terms of the ones that are available. I mean, the obvious one is LinkedIn, and I would highly recommend that people prioritize 80% of their efforts onto LinkedIn. I think Twitter is quite a tough nut to crack, as is Facebook, but increasingly Instagram is also becoming important. And the other one that people need to be aware of is what some people call Google My Business, which some people also call Google Local, and it's the map area of Google, and they're making some changes to that, which means that increasingly that is looking much more like a social media platform. So I would encourage people to invest time. It's not necessarily a cash investment, but it certainly is a time investment in creating their own original content. And that could be photos, it could be videos, it could be written, it could be audio, but it's certainly something that is becoming more and more important. And of course, now that we all have mobile phones with good quality cameras, good quality videos, it is within all of our capabilities to create that content. And one tip I can give to people is that, well, actually 3 tips. One is to be brave. Many people, myself included, find it very difficult to create a video of themselves talking to camera. But if you can do that, because so many people find it difficult, that can help you to stand out in your content. Also, leverage your teams. Many of your teams will have large followings themselves, and if you can tap into that, that's a very cheap and effective way of increasing your reach on social media. And then finally, it's very normal that content about people always performs better than content about products or other such items. So what people really want to hear about on social media is stories about people. So I'd encourage you to create stories about yourself, about your people, about your customers. Tell those stories, and that will get you much more engagement. But it absolutely fundamental. I think that if potential clients are researching you as a potential workspace partner, and you don't have any presence at all on social media, I think these days that will raise some question marks in their mind. And finally, one last point: these brands like LinkedIn and Instagram are very strong and, in inverted commas, cool brands themselves. And simply by being on them and by being active on them, you can tap into to some of that brand value yourselves. So yeah, really, really important.
Okay, thank you. That's some really helpful practical advice. I know as an association, we've been using this range of social media, but LinkedIn is definitely the one that gets the most engagement, I think, as a sort of practical work tool, and people going there to find information. Okay, so moving back to tech a bit more. Perhaps start with Chris on this one. Which tech should operators invest in to maximise the marketability of their space? And do you have any examples of what's worked best for you with projects?
There's an awful lot we could say here, so I'll try and summarise. I think at the moment what we're seeing is important for everybody really is ongoing investment into your website. I mean, for us, it's the window into our offering, and it's a key engagement platform with our customers. So at a time like this, when we're not all in the office or all in our business centres, it's proven a key and critical way for us to communicate with our customers, for example. So that's an area where we're continually looking to invest. For example, virtual viewings and VR has been used to present space to customers who can't physically be in buildings, as an example. And I would imagine that's an area where we'll focus even more moving forward as people become more comfortable with viewing space in that manner. I think simplifying our sales and customer onboarding process is a key priority for us as well. And again, that can be linked to the website. So as we try and put more of a transactional capability for even office space of a 2-year lease, for example, that convenience and that new way of purchasing space or renting space is something that we are considering as well. And we are spending a lot of time and thought into that. Going back to reliable and secure connectivity, I mean, the debate here is all around how much of a hygiene factor this really is for customers in reality. There is an expectation that connectivity is secure and it works all the time. I think the reality from our experience over the years is there's a huge amount of investment required in the background to provide that level of service, and customer demands are changing all the time. You know, for example, we're seeing a lot more use of video conferencing across our business centres as and when people are in. As people return to offices, clearly there'll be more demands and burden on Wi-Fi, which we'll expect to see. The challenge, of course, is how do you market that to customers? And our approach here is, given that we own our properties, we've been in a position to work directly with WiredScore, who are a digital rating scheme, who keep us on our toes, for want of a better word, and assess our properties every 2 years to ensure they're fit for purpose from a digital connectivity point of view, and will continue to be so, you know, for years to come. And the point here is around communicating that to customers, doing joint branding, for example, on some of our communication, and really elevating the importance of what they do for us. So our aim here is to reassure customers that we have everything covered, but it is quite challenging to do that. And as I say, there's a lot of investment required in the background to deliver it.
Yeah, there's clearly a lot of options on what can be done at the moment. So it's making those right decisions, isn't it, as well? Dan, what advice would you give on this and your thoughts?
I mean, for us, we've all heard the ongoing debate, I think, of Wi-Fi or water. And in the flexible office environment, we actually find that Wi-Fi comes out on top before beverages actually does. So it's a key differentiator for different spaces. And we've talked about meeting room technology. We're going to talk about smart buildings and Internet of Things shortly, I believe. All of that stems to how good your Wi-Fi connection is. Yes, we can offer hardwired connections, and operators still have hardwired connections into most tenant units. But the trends we've been noticing over even pre-COVID was a move away from traditional hardwired services towards Wi-Fi. Everyone's expected high quality Wi-Fi connectivity as they are at home, when they're in a coffee shop, even when they're in a shopping centre, and then obviously within their workspace. Now, this is going to change the way people work moving forward, and wireless is almost the safest way to operate that. It's just a simple, clean down of a desk, you operate your device. If you're going to be adopting some sort of hybrid working with different people in and out of offices, different days, it's a minimal sort of touch on the surfaces within that office. But that all comes down to how good and how strong your Wi-Fi is. And yes, you may have had Wi-Fi operating for several years within a building, but it's about making sure you're still at the bleeding edge of that technology, because Wi-Fi changes all the time. We're starting to deploy Wi-Fi 6 shortly as well, which is going to be the new platform for Wi-Fi moving forward. And it's making sure you've got a connectivity partner or a Wi-Fi partner that is aware of everything like interference, and with the way that construction is changing within these flexible workspaces, it's important to note that you can't just plug in an access point like a home and expect to have Wi-Fi throughout the space. So it's making sure you assess that from all angles. But for us, it really should be Wi-Fi that is invested in heavily at the moment.
Yeah, no, it really does feel like the world grinds to a halt if you lose your connection even for a short period of time now, which is terrible, but it is the reality of life. Rob, is there anything that you'd like to add on that point?
Yeah, just a couple of points. I think Chris is absolutely bang on when he talks about his website. By definition, if people can't be in your space physically, then website and virtual tours and the like offer an alternative. I think the point about, I'm not a technology specialist, but I think the point about Wi-Fi is absolutely right. I think there is a debate as to whether the Wi-Fi in itself is a differentiator. And the analogy I would perhaps use is an operating system like Windows, and then the applications that are put on top of that. And in my mind, I see really good Wi-Fi as the kind of foundation, if you like, a really good operating system. And then the differentiators, I think, are the applications that are put on top of that operating system. And without that, of course, they can't work. But we're going to come on to talk about, I believe, more about kind of smart technology. And of course, that cannot work without Wi-Fi. But in terms of where the differentiation lies, I think in a operating system analogy, it's more the kind of applications rather than the foundation, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. So yes, moving on to something that we've touched on. We're hearing increasingly about the Internet of Things and automation achieved through technology. And it'd be interesting to explore what opportunities these offer operators. And Dan, if I can start with you, but perhaps you could say a little bit just to explain those areas for anyone that's not familiar with them.
No, of course, and the Internet of Things is a buzzword across many industries at the moment, even from automated fridges that tell you we've run out of butter. So it literally is a vast array of sensors and that kind of thing. What we're seeing is more in the smart office buildings, which traditionally has only ever been sort of enterprise landlords building a new structure in the centre of London, operating it as a smart building. That over the last year or two, that has changed. A smart building can be someone with a single space, a single office space that is putting sensors in there to monitor foot traffic within a meeting space to see if it's being utilised. It can be sensors that monitor how busy coffee machines are at 9 o'clock in the morning, which is very important data for an operator to decide, well, actually, no, one coffee machine isn't enough. We're going to need two there. And within the events of this year, we've found that a lot of buildings are adopting what they're calling wellness sensors or health and wellness sensors. So it's monitoring things like the oxygen level within workspaces, the humidity factor. Also, if you've got something like a rooftop terrace, we've put sensors in that are monitoring how windy it is. So if you're planning to do an outdoor event at an office, it's actually too windy, we need to get the office furniture in. We can't do that event inside. We'll have to do it at the a ground level event instead. And tying all that together is software platforms behind that, which you need to be able to a single pane of glass. A landlord or the front desk operator, the front of house center manager, for example, can clearly see how the spaces are being utilized, where there's heavy foot traffic, if a toilet block needs to be cleaned. All that information is available on hand, and that's kind of the trend we're seeing now, and certainly how it will be in the coming months and years for all operators, I believe. Does that sum up the sort of Internet and Things and?
Sounds, yes, a good explainer. Yes, thank you. So Chris, is this something that Workspace are putting into practice?
Yes, I mean we're taking quite a high level view at the moment. I mean the key benefits, of course, I think for us would be around operational efficiencies. Sorry, it's dull, but ultimately that's for us with with up to 60 properties across the capital. That's the key area for us to consider is operationally, how does it add value and how does it make our operations more efficient? And clearly there are energy savings to be had with some of the IoT technologies that Dan's referenced there. So the key challenges for us are around how we would effectively retrofit this type of technology across our centres. So the challenge is finding the right type of technology to provide those efficiencies, but also finding the right technology that can be deployed and can be integrated with some of our existing systems. So that's what's keeping me up at night at the moment. I absolutely see the benefits of introducing technology. It's just how we do it with our environment and our portfolio. I mean the other benefits, of course, as well with this technology at scale is around looking at how efficient your space utilization is with any given property. I mean, we tend to apply around 20 to 25% of space within our buildings to communal areas. So what this technology allows us to do in the long run is assess how effective we are with our design, and behavioural changes with customers and requirements, backed up with data, would obviously allow us to be more effective at that quick decision making. So we absolutely see the benefits of doing it. It's the introduction into our legacy systems that's the challenge.
Yeah, it's choices to be made, isn't it? Because I guess no business can do absolutely everything, so it's what's best to do. Rob, have you any sort of experience of seeing this amongst your clients or more generally?
Well, I've had a lot of conversations with both providers in this area and operators and owners actually, and I think it's something that's going to take time to wash through the system, a period of years. But I do think, the previous point we were talking about differentiation, and I do think that there is a much greater awareness now about the impact of the air that we breathe and the light conditions that we're working under on our productivity and our health, and team morale and happiness, which obviously are fundamental. So I also think that it won't be long until people themselves are going to be able to measure these things in handheld devices. So I understand that particularly on air quality, with perhaps HVAC systems that need investment, that's quite a sensitive discussion, and there are all sorts of implications. Is it landlord, is it operator, to make those investments? But my own personal view is, and it's just a view, is that over a period of sort of 5 years plus, I think that the quality of air and the quality of light is going to be as fundamental to our offering as location and Wi-Fi is today. Because if you imagine that, obviously there are UV screening systems in HVAC which can destroy bacteria, viruses, of course, and particulates impact on health. There's a big campaign in the Times around clean air. So I really do see the quality of air that we breathe inside at work as being a massive issue over the next sort of 5 years or so.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot to think about clearly in this area. So moving on, I think again we sort of touched on this a little bit earlier. With the growth of hybrid working, how can flexible workspace operators adapt to support this? And Rob, do we maybe start with you on this one?
Yeah, I mean, now we come to the dreaded conversation about the new normal. So I think there is a general acceptance that there will be greater flexibility than perhaps pre-COVID, and that will vary massively. But I think there is some kind of consensus around some level of hybrid working. I think it really depends on the kind of company you are. If you're a larger operator and you've got the network and the resources to be able to execute the technology, then I think that's an easier proposition to offer that product to the market, that kind of hyper flexible part-time office potentially that we were talking about. It's much more challenging, I think, if you're a smaller operator. But I think there are ways through that. You could partner with other providers who operate in areas that you don't, and there are multiple tech platforms available for operators to sign up to, which can do the tech for you. One invoice, one user interface, etc. So as Chris said, it's a heavy investment to get this kind of technology up and running, but there are third parties who can do it for you.
Okay, Dan, what is the answers on the tech side of this?
I mean, we've kind of touched on it throughout this conversation anyway, and for me to keep harping on about Wi-Fi, but it is key to allow yourself to be flexible and creating sort of collaboration spaces where people do feel comfortable moving forward. I think the idea of a set desk with a keyboard and a mouse that's permanently there, I think maybe we may be moving away from. The hybrid office, as I see it, will be just an empty desk that's easy to clean, and you bring your own device or you bring your company laptop, you sit and work wherever's free that day. You could even, companies may set up rotors using software platforms or their websites, where who's in and who's out, or of a morning for maybe a local flexible operator, that someone that has a short commute distance to their flexible office space, they can check in the morning, say, oh, actually, there's a lot of free desks today, I will go in and work. But that all comes back to the technology behind that's allowing that flexibility. But I mean, as Rob touched on there, it's the investment in technology to get to that stage. But historically, that has only been available to these enterprise or blue chip companies. I don't believe that's the case anymore. I believe that achieving this hybrid flexible approach is available to everyone, and whether it be business, flexible office space, or even residential.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Chris, on this question of hybrid working.
Yeah, I think in reality for us, not realistically, not a huge amount has actually changed in terms of what's available through our business centres. I mean, we've provided effectively flexible and hybrid working opportunities for customers for years. So, you know, we often see different people coming in on different days, for example, even pre-crisis. That's been quite common, and we often see a lot more activity midweek than we do, you know, Mondays and Fridays. So we do see our customers adopting, or having already adopted, in fact, this style of working. Clearly, it's more acute now than it was before, and I would imagine it will be even more acute moving forward. But you know, the flex office space and the environment that we provide, it does cater for that requirement as it is. There's absolutely some tweaks we can make with technology to improve that experience and improve visibility and engagement. But actually, we've seen our customers working in this way for years. You know, our space typically caters for those businesses between 5 and 10 staff members, and clearly there's rotation within those staff members within the space. The other thing I'll say on this point as well is regarding the sort of flexibility within the building. We've had building-wide Wi-Fi again for a number of years now, and what we do tend to see is a lot of people working outside of their office space and within the communal areas, for example. So we'd expect to see that to continue, and I would imagine obviously in the summer months we'll see the roof terraces used more than ever. But yeah, we're seeing the same trends as before, but probably in a more acute fashion moving forward.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen some really good roof terraces in flexible workspace providers, which is some with some fantastic views in London and Bristol in particular. I've visited some. So, question just as we sort of head towards the close. Have you seen a change in customer behaviour when they're in the office since the start of the pandemic? And just to link in with that, we've had a question submitted as to whether you think that employers run the risk of losing talented staff by working from home in the future, which I think links in with that. Rob, can we start with you?
It's an interesting question that's just come in. I think yes, potentially there is a risk there. I think that the only thing we can say for sure is that the new, in inverted commas, normal won't be 5 days at home mostly, and it also won't be 5 days in the office, and it'll settle somewhere in between. And I think the main factor that decides where that settles is the culture of a particular company. And I think that it is important that, I mean, clearly employees are going to want more flexibility than previously. Employers are probably going to want people to come back in for obvious reasons, and I think there has to be a settlement somewhere in the middle. And I think there should be some kind of recognition by companies for what employees are wanting, and like any marketplace, it's a competitive marketplace, and if the employee offering isn't what they want, then yeah, they could go elsewhere. Regarding the question about behaviour within the centres, perhaps Chris might be, in fact, perhaps you just answered that question actually.
Well, Chris, do you want to pick up on that?
Well, I think one key difference that we're seeing, and this will come across obvious now, but we're seeing a lot more video conferencing requirements within our meeting rooms, as you'd expect to see. I mean, we didn't see a huge demand for that at all pre-crisis, and now it's a key requirement as part of the meeting room, as Wi-Fi was before, actually. So that's one key difference that we're seeing. I think we're seeing a lot more video traffic again, as you'd expect to see over our Wi-Fi network. What were phone calls before and our video calls, irrespective of whether you're going to meet that person face to face. So, you know, I don't know the exact stat, but I would imagine it's well over 50 to 75% of all communication now is done with a video as opposed to an audio only. So these are key considerations that we have to take on board, and actually providing an element of privacy within communal space might be another consideration moving forward as well. In our newer centres, we've got sort of semi-covered booths that give some of our customers a bit more privacy for a phone call, but obviously holding a phone is different to using a laptop. So we're going to have to rethink some of that space to accommodate for laptop devices as opposed to people sat down using telephones. But I've seen some fairly creative stands that people are using to rest their phones on to do video conferencing. So maybe they'll be the new thing. Who knows? But absolutely seeing a lot more video conferencing activity. We are seeing a lot more extremes in terms of that midweek, end of week activity that I mentioned earlier. So there's much less activity on a Monday and a Friday, and there is much more activity biased towards middle of the week. So I think the as I mentioned earlier, the acuteness of the new way of flexible working seems to be more pronounced now than it was before. And obviously we're in a position where we can hopefully cater for those customers as and when they come back to the office.
Okay, thank you. Yes, it's been interesting that in the olden days, where pre-March, phone calls were just you would pick up the phone to somebody, but there is a real shift towards people saying that they will send you the Zoom link or the Teams link or whatever, and there is that expectation now that you will meet someone face to face virtually. Dan, what are you seeing at Excell in this area or amongst your clients, and what are you being asked to support, I suppose?
Yeah, no, of course, and to kind of echo Chris and Rob's comments, bandwidth utilisation across our network video is being utilised very compared to what it was before, which was minimal. Which for me personally, a positive of all this is the fact that technology we've had around for several years is now being adopted by people. Things like Microsoft Teams and Zoom, technology that's always kind of been in the background that has never really been used. Now it's in every, if Microsoft Teams has an outage, that affects the country. So I'm taking that as a positive, that these tools that we've had at our disposal are now being used, and the curve to get them to a usable state has been, well, exponential this year, hasn't it? The amount of updates we've had from Microsoft Teams, for example, has now got it to a very stable platform. In terms of Wi-Fi trends and usage, obviously we monitor the Wi-Fi networks throughout all of our operators. And again, to echo Chris's comments, that midweek seems to be the peak of Wi-Fi usage across most operators. And then the Monday to Friday seems to drop off back down to sort of 15 to 20% utilization as to where it was pre-COVID. And that's rural as well as city-based. We've seen slightly higher numbers actually in rural operators as opposed to city operators. That's not just London or Manchester, that's all UK cities. Rural actually has had a slight improvement on numbers from before. So that's interesting to note. Some of our operators that have opened new spaces or actually have been lucky enough to sign new tenants during this time, I'm sorry to touch back to Wi-Fi, but we've seen those guys take Wi-Fi only as opposed to having a lot of equipment coming in. They've gone for this hybrid approach where, no, we want all users just to have Wi-Fi coming out as they please. So that's an interesting trend we've spotted. And new spaces that have been built during this time, I think, Chris, you touched on, these sort of small phone booths where people can actually go in with their laptop and do a private video chat. That seems to be the new normal, to use that phrase as well, for a new space opening, which we think is quite interesting.
Okay, thank you. So, sort of reached the end now. Just a final question. The Flexible Space Association has been gathering the views of our board and other leading figures on what's in store for 2021. And clearly, at the start of 2020, we would never have predicted the year that we've had. But can you do a bit of crystal ball gazing and give your prediction for flexible workspace in the next year? We'll start with you, Chris, on that.
Absolutely. So I think the commercial real estate market in general is being increasingly driven by the end user, i.e. the customer. And I think we're going to see a much more customer-centric approach being adopted throughout the sector. I think that's pretty clear. And I would say that flexibility will be even more attractive to businesses, either restarting or rebuilding, and FlexSpace will be more relevant than ever.
Okay, thank you. And Rob?
Absolutely. I'm an optimist by nature, but I don't think it's overly optimistic to say that at some point in Q1 the market's going to turn, and when it does turn, I think it's going to turn decisively with even more momentum than previously. So it's a question of when, not a question of if. All the macro trends are in our favour. And I think that when we're sitting here in a year's time looking back on 2021, I think we'll be looking back on an extremely good year.
And finally, Dan, hoping you've got a similarly positive view.
No, indeed as well. And I think we'll be surprised at the type of clients that will be looking at flexible space. I believe the traditional sort of banking or financial institutions, I believe they're going to be a large uptaker of flexible space moving forward, for the hybrid flexible working approach that's going to offer. But also, I don't believe that your new sort of software developer is going to want to work in an old-fashioned banking office where they have to wear a suit and tie. They're going to want a nice, trendy, flexible workspace to come in and out of as they please, which is what the flexible office environment offers. So you might see these large corporate banks that traditionally would take a 25-year lease on a whole tower block will now be split up into little hybrid teams across operators that are part of this forum. So that's what I believe. I think it will be a different trend in the type of tenants, which is exciting for everyone.
Thank you. Yes, and clearly lots of opportunities ahead, and it's clearly still challenging times at the moment, but it does feel like there's the real optimism in the industry. And if people take a look at our social media channels we talked about earlier, we've been sharing views of others on this, and we'll carry on doing so over the next week on what's in store for 2021. So thank you very much to Chris, Dan, and Rob for sharing your thoughts this morning. This is obviously our last webinar of the year, so I just want to thank Zoe Kemp at the Flexible Space Association, who's been organising all of these webinars across the year, and all are on our YouTube channel now if you have time over the next few weeks and want to catch up. We will be continuing them into in 2021, and very happy to hear any ideas that people have for topics to cover. So thank you very much, and have a good, hopefully, Christmas and New Year break, everybody. Thank you.